will get a fair trial from a human court, even though ostensibly the law is the same for humans and mutants. Whereas Xavier thinks genoism is grounded in fear of the unknown, Magneto knows that's not true. Systemic genoism preserves existing power and profit structures. For instance, in the comics, there's an island nation called Genosha, where mutants are enslaved and channeled into labor markets, not out of fear, but to keep the state running and profitable. Just like in real life, the transatlantic slave trade was informed by racial prejudice, to be sure, but it grew out of a desire for cheap labor, and systemic racism was then developed to justify it. Or another example, in the comics, the US government experiments on mutants to produce weapons like Wolverine, not out of fear, but to maintain the US's strategic military advantage. Liberalism has its rules about equality and freedom, but Magneto sees genoism as a key part of systems that constantly and deliberately make exceptions to those rules for mutants to serve the interests of human power. So he thinks you can't reform a system that's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. The only option is to destroy it. If you'd like to know more about systems of power that make exceptions of people, you can click on that card that's just appeared in the top right. I've done videos about them before. In his article Violence, Peace and Peace Research, Norwegian sociologist Johan Galtung says that it's very difficult to reject either direct violence or structural violence without embracing the other. Not impossible, just difficult. Professor X rejects direct violence in favour of peace, where peace is the absence of violence. But in doing so, he assumes that there can be an absence of violence whilst the systems he lives under are still standing, which is impossible if genoism is central to how they operate. He rejects direct violence, but in doing so, he effectively sides with the systems that maintain structural genoism and all the violence that they inflict. Magneto rejects structural violence, but in doing so, he uses a lot of direct violence. He kills people. In X-Men First Class, he says, peace was never an option. Some people might say that direct violence has no place in politics, and they might point to the Russian Revolution or the French Revolution as examples of that, cases where direct violence was used and it went bad. But it has been used for good, too. The Stonewall riots, the Rent riots, the Irish War for Independence, the American War for Independence, the Haitian Revolution, the Cuban Revolution, the Jamaican Slave Revolt, the list goes on. There is a history of direct violence against property, and sometimes even people, being used for liberation. It's very easy to stand back and say, all violence is bad, everyone except me is bad. But a much more difficult question to answer is, they are killing us, what are you going to do about it? I am not advocating the use of violence by anybody. What I'm trying to show you is that the use of direct violence against property and people as a tactic of political resistance is not as simple an issue as liberalism might have you think. The kicker is, a lot of people would say that direct violence is justified if it's in self-defense. And when you live under structural violence constantly, like Magneto and his fellow mutants do, they might say that a lot of their actions are ultimately to defend themselves. And that's not a viewpoint that you can just write off. You've got to engage with it. When it comes to the X-Men, there's two big questions I have. The first is, which version of Magneto are we talking about here? In the films, he's all like, oh, I'm sad, Charles, and that's why it's okay for me to murder people all the time. And in the cartoons, he's like, I'm basically a Nazi, mutants are superior. So have there been any versions of him that focus more on the political revolutionary aspect? The second question I have is whether there's been any discussion of intersectionality in X-Men. Intersectionality refers to the fact that some people can be multiply oppressed. It can't have escaped Magneto's notice that people who are mutants and also trans, or also members of racial minorities, or also disabled, or women, or LGBT, can face multiple layers of oppression. And if he's read his history, he'd know that liberation movements can sometimes forget that. In Ain't I a Woman, feminist activist Bell Hooks points out that first and second wave feminism were pretty racist movements. Have either Magneto or Professor X located their mutantism within wider movements, like feminism or environmentalism or anti-capitalism? If only I had a comic book enthusiast who could help me with these questions.
Oh, hey, I'm one of those, and I've been reading up on some X-Men lately, so I think I can help you out here. In the comics, as you would expect, Magneto's goals and motivations are all over the place. It seems to vary from writer to writer in order to either frame him as an objectively evil villain, a sympathetic anti-hero, or even simply a full ally of the X-Men. Magneto is one of the most notorious mutants in Marvel, and he can be quite malleable in order to fit whatever story the writers want to tell with him, not to mention all the alternate realities, which we are definitely not going to get into. As for political revolution, one of the best examples of this comes from the amazing God Loves, Man Kills story, where Magneto explains to the X-Men exactly what his end goal is. Quote, "True, my goal has ever been the conquest of Earth, but solely to create a world where our race, Homo Superior, can live in peace. Look at yourselves, risking your lives for a humanity that would rather see you behind bars or dead. Why do you persist?" To which Cyclops responds, "Is your way any better? A mutant dictatorship?" Magneto quickly fires back, "I have lived under a dictatorship and have seen my family butchered by its servants. When I rule, it will be for the betterment of all. Contentment breeds tranquility, discontent, rebellion. Therefore, I shall ensure the one by eliminating the root cause of the other. Hunger, poverty, disease, war. The freedoms lost will not be noticed even in the most libertarian of states, and the material benefits should more than balance the scales." And he got one step closer to that goal when he launched a terrorist attack on the entire planet that resulted in the United Nations striking a deal with him. In exchange for never carrying out a strike like that again, he would be given sovereignty over the fictional island of Genosha, which he attempted to turn into a mutant haven. Where Charles Xavier had a single school, Magneto would have an entire country with which he could rule over and protect his fellow mutants, which at one time reached a population of over 16 million before almost all of them were killed by a devastating Sentinel attack. That, and a handful of other events, left Genosha in ruins, unable to become the mutant nation Magneto hoped it would. Magneto is also an interesting case when it comes to intersectionality, as he is both a mutant and a Holocaust survivor. But honestly, this is an area that seems to be lacking with the X-Men. I mean, sure, there are X-Men of color, the most famous of which would probably be Storm, but racial issues tend to be tackled less explicitly, instead using characters like Beast or Nightcrawler to represent the idea of being judged based solely off of your appearance and or the color of your skin/fur. And even though there are gay mutants, issues of homophobia aren't often clearly expressed either. Instead, Marvel chooses to use mutant kind as a blank canvas upon which anyone can project whatever oppression they feel in their lives, basically trying to appeal to the widest audience possible by being more vague than they should. Instead of calling out specific issues, they let the reader interpret mutants as whatever real-world group they want. Effectively, Marvel is letting people read whatever they want into the stories.
Thanks a lot, Scott. I'm surprised there's been no discussion of intersectionality in X-Men, but it does seem like the time is right for an interpretation of Magneto's character where he's a political revolutionary fighting systemic genoism. I smell a reboot! We talked today about different responses to systemic oppression and the use of violence as a tactic of resistance, and Scott has a video over on NerdSync where he's asking why do humans even hate mutants in the first place, and there's all kinds of cool, convoluted comic book explanations for it, and I have a cameo in it talking about people's relationships to power, so do go, click on that video, go, watch it now, it's brilliant. At patreon.com/philosophytube you can help me give away more free education on YouTube, and please don't forget to subscribe.